Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I hope you're having an awesome time so far. Our next speaker is Dr. Nels Lindahl. He is Director of Clinical Decision Systems at CVS Health. Please join me in welcoming him to our virtual stage.
Hello, Patricia. Glad to be here. Let me get my slides shared here. All right, bear with me just 1 second here. We'll get the slide share going. All right, here we go. So folks, thank you so much for attending my session here at AI4. I'm so happy to be here. I can't wait for the next time that we have an opportunity to see each other in person and be able to exchange ideas. So I'm Dr. Nels Lindahl. I'm a clinical systems IT director at a Fortune 5 company, the author of Graduation with Civic Honors, an avid writer, tech chaser, sports car collector, and a major TensorFlow enthusiast. You can find me at Twitter, at Nels Lindahl, or LinkedIn, and you can subscribe to my Substack newsletter. I publish it every Friday. What am I going to talk about today? The title of my talk today is The ML Scale Problem, thinking about where and when to use ML, ROI models, synthetic data, repeatable frameworks, and teams. What exactly does that mean? Well, you'll find out in the next 25 minutes. So, a brief research disclaimer. This presentation includes original research. All the content is mine and reflects my current views on the topics under consideration. Those views were current at the point of this publication, but things in this space change rapidly. So, my direct agenda for today. What are we going to be covering? We're going to be looking at initiating. What is scale exactly? Analyzing use cases, scale versus maturity, directing, leaning into the ML scale, and platforming. What is compelling about ML ops? So hopefully that is what you came here to listen to today, and we're gonna not waste a second and just get going. So initiating. What is scale exactly? Well, conceptually, I've been breaking down the categories of ML use cases into 3 buckets. Bucket 1 are things you can call, e.g. just some examples, some external APIs. And I think that's the easiest place if you want to go out and start getting machine learning built into your workflows. It's the easiest because all you have to do is go out and consume it. You just need to connect to it, send some information out, get some information back, and you're ready to go. Bucket 2 is places you can be. Ecosystems where you can build out your footprint, like AWS, GCP, Azure, and many others that are springing up for MLOps delivery. And I do mean many others. You're starting to see other ecosystems besides the major 3 that are popping up, and they're going to provide a different workflow in a different place where you can be to serve up your ML models and to be able to get going in this space. Now, the third category and bucket 3 is when you're building something yourself. These are the open source and self-tooled solutions. And I tried to make this bucket just a little bit bigger because I feel like that's where a lot of this gets started. And a few years ago, it was the primary place. And now we're seeing a shift. We're seeing that movement into where those APIs are so easily available and you can get into these ecosystems where you can get going so quickly that things are moving around and changing. That categorization of the 3 buckets helps me think about where things are for use cases and where things are going to happen. It's a very tactical question versus a strategic one. So sometimes it's easier to lock in and focus on a specific project and forget about how that project fits into a broader strategy. So if you've heard me talk before, you know that I'm super interested in how you present your machine learning strategy. So it's not just about the 3 buckets and what you're doing and what you're considering. It's about how you put that pitch together. Your machine learning strategy has to be able to tell people what you're trying to accomplish. And not only what you're trying to accomplish, but what it's going to do for the organization. Now, if you're going out and you're sharing that machine learning strategy, and you're trying to get the organization to commit their precious funds, their dollars to your strategy, you're probably talking about a budget level investment. Now, that budget level investment is going to require you to do a few things to have some commitments. Now, those commitments are probably going to be a budget level key KPI, key performance indicator for your ML spending. How do I go about managing that? What do I do? Well, you knew it was going to be a compendium of KPIs, including return on investment. So I start to build those things through so that I'm tracking and modeling and understanding exactly what's going to happen within the deployment of my machine learning strategy so that I can communicate out at all levels the success, or, in some cases, you may have some failure and you need to retool and explain to people what you're doing. But your compendium of KPIs is what's going to be able to build that communication strategy and let you be successful. After you've done those first 4 things, then and only then can you switch over and start doing some ML use case delivery. That's where the fun happens, right? And as you start delivering your ML use cases, you're going to find out real quick that you're going to need an ongoing ML ops to be able to sustain and continue and to do all the things that you committed to when you ask for those funds, have a budget level commitment. So in this slide here, what I did was take a look at some different common APIs from AWS, Azure, and GCP, and just kind of looked at them versus scale versus maturity. So you can think about this as bucket 1. These are things you can call. So it's part of your machine learning strategy. You must be about purpose, replication, and reuse. That's going to be at the heart of getting value back for your organization. And going out and using an API is a great way to get value back really quickly. Because if you go out and use AWS Enterprise Search or GCP Vision API or the AWS transcription service, you already have all the training, all the model building. All the hard work was done over on the folks that are housing and working with these APIs. So that investment up front was there already. So you can get right to the point where you're able to interject this into your workflow and be able to do some fun and interesting things really quickly. Now, some of these things, as you move kind of, down and to the left, are going to start being a little bit harder to interject. It's going to take a little longer to get your API chatbot going. It's going to take a little bit longer to do some GCP Dialogflow API. But they're worth it, they're interesting, and this is one way to go. And this is how I start to think about bucket 1. So from a budget line item to actually being operationalized, you have to apply your machine learning strategy in a uniform way based on potential return on investment. And yes, that's what I keep coming back to. So your machine learning strategy must be at the forefront of what you're trying to communicate. You want it to be definable and repeatable. You want to be able to share that vision. You want your elevator pitch from the top down to be a part of what the organization knows is happening. That's so powerful because when you're thinking about the where and when to use your machine learning, you're going to get the best bottom-up work from the folks that know and can think about the examples, can think about what could happen. When they can bring all their SME level ideas about machine learning use cases and match that up to your machine learning strategy, when those two things come together, that's where success is going to be formed for your organization. Now, that success is not just from the ideation phase. It's from your return on investment models that require ongoing monitoring so that you can really understand exactly what's going on, so that you really know from quarter to quarter, from month to month, is this successful? Is this model working? Does it need tuning? Do you need to do something with it? At the same time, though, you can get into a space where maybe you're making a decision about synthetic data versus other data strategies. Now, if you're building a machine learning model and you know exactly what to do, and you have a really good idea about what the data looks like during your entire process, and you can build data synthetically that looks like your real data, that probably means that you have a good understanding of exactly what's going on. And you could be in a position where building some synthetic data and having a lot more data available for training and other things may work out really well for you. Otherwise, you may have to look into other data strategies that get a little bit more complex. But I think being able to create synthetic data is something that you should definitely take a look at, and it's worth further consideration. So you need to make sure you have repeatable frameworks, and they're key for defined MLOps plans. And once you get into this process where you're building pipelines and you're operationalizing your machine learning, you're going to find out that doing it in a definable and repeatable way is going to be key to that success. But it's not going to work if you don't have the right teams. You may have to go out to a vendor, you may have to build those internal teams, you may have to do things to get it right. But I'll tell you, if you have the strategy and the ideation going, but you don't have the team to execute it, it may be time to put on the brakes and just think a little bit longer and dig more in and figure out who you can bring in to make it successful. So this is the directing slide. Here we're gonna look about leaning into ML scale. So this is bucket 2, and this is bucket 3. So these are places you can be, ecosystems where you can build stuff out. And bucket 3, building something out yourself. These are just general use cases. And I think this is a really great way to just kind of think about what's possible within your machine learning strategy. You can do some image recognition, some product recommendations, some monitoring systems, maybe some account prioritization. Maybe you're in a business where lead prioritization makes sense. Not every business sound pattern matching is going to make sense, or geospatial analysis. Just because you can build something out with a machine learning model doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do for your business. Now, this is a good sampling of things you can do and can jump into right now. So maybe look at those things and figure out where the best things you can do in your strategy are going to come together to be successful. But by all means, you don't want to try to do everything. So definable and repeatable results are the groundwork to predictable machine learning engagements. I think it's really important to really think about where you can go and what you can do within those machine learning engagements. So now that we took a look at what's possible and looked at a lot of those use cases, let's dig in here and start to get into the ML ops part of the equation. So I'll tell you a pro tip real quick. If you've never done this, you might want to consider going out to GitHub and just looking at GitHub/trending. Now, if you've never done that and you've never looked to see exactly what people are working on right now, it's a powerful way for you to just think about what's important to people right now. So anyway, I grabbed this GitHub repository information for a few of the key open source machine learning projects I'm tracking for comparison. On the next slide, I'm going to go to dig into a little bit deeper on some of the ML projects that I think are very valuable. So let's look at the first one here, TensorFlow. So TensorFlow has 154,000 stars. People have really used it. It has 2,933 contributors. Almost 3,000 people are contributing to TensorFlow. PyTorch, you can see it drops off considerably. It's going to go from around 154,000 stars to just 47,000 stars. And the number of contributors is going to drop off significantly as well. Now you're down to around 1,785 contributors. Now, on the PyTorch example, they do have 4,620 branches, which honestly, I don't know why you'd want to look at that many branches. No human wants to manage 4,000 branches of anything. So definitely, I definitely understand more on the TensorFlow and the scikit-learn number of branches. So scikit-learn, it has roughly 44,000 stars and it has 1,936 contributors. So you can kind of see here that the three major things that are out there for machine learning are definitely adopted. People are using them and they're making forks of it. They're making versions of it and they're starting to really dig into it. So now if we take it the next level and look a little bit deeper in terms of what's happening with the ML ops part of it, you're going to see a major drop off. Remember, TensorFlow had 154,000 stars. Now you're starting to see the number of stars drop off considerably. You're starting to see that number of stars at 10,000. You're starting to see Kubeflow, MLflow, and some of these things that are complex stuff like Metaflows from Netflix, and you're only going to see 4,000 stars. And each of these things is going to have sub 500 contributors. So based on the order of magnitude difference between TensorFlow and some of these things, one of the things that you can directly tell from this information is that none of these tools for ML ops have really grabbed a significant market share. None of them have become the key product yet. And so we haven't seen everyone swarm in and start using these things. One of the reasons that this is the case is on that previous chart when we saw the different things for an API. When you start thinking about the different ecosystems that are out there, the pipelines and the ecosystem for something in bucket 2 where you can be, you're going to start using the ecosystem stuff that's available. So if you start going into bucket 2 where you're on Azure or you're on GCP and you're making those decisions, or you're on AWS, you're going to work within the stack for machine learning that's available for that ecosystem. That's why you chose to go there. That's one of the reasons why that is going to be the place that you're going to be at. So I think it's really interesting here. And you can see that none of these are branching out as many branches as the previous look at it. So this space here, if we take these items and we break them out into a chart that's sort of similar to the previous chart, you're going to see that I think there's a wide spectrum here. Now, You may not totally agree with how I place these things versus scale and maturity, and that's okay. Feel free to let me know if you have a differing opinion on one of these technologies. And depending on where you're at with your ML use case, you're going to have some very different machine learning operations needs. So up at the very top, you're going to see some of these things that's going to be related to the Kubeflow or Pachyderm or Azure. The major players are going to be predominant in that space. And so that's where I think you're starting to see the mix of other things after it that are really starting to take off. And they do have vibrant ecosystems and communities. Weights and biases, for example, people are really interested in that, and it has a vibrant community around it. And some of these other items definitely have vibrant communities, and they're building out. And what I'll be looking for here in probably the next year or so is to see which ones really bubble up to being super successful for that bucket 3 instance where people are building stuff out and they need the ML ops tools to be able to successfully operationalize their strategy. Because there's going to be so much stuff being done that's not done out in an ecosystem. It's going to be the stuff that's done, not the back of the envelope type stuff, but it's going to be the stuff that you're doing and building within the machine learning space to do that next level of thing. And that next level of thing isn't going to happen from the APIs, because it's not going to be a pre-trained model that you're buying to be able to do these things. People are going to want to do things that are complex and going to be directly tied to what they're delivering from their business. Those business use cases, those very tailored specific use cases for delivery in your machine learning workflow are going to require so much more than what that API can provide. And because of that and that delivery, you're going to start seeing these ML ops companies, GitHub projects, and things really take off. And I'm looking in the next year or so to see exactly which ones gain the predominant market share. So this is the last slide. And I want to just thank everybody for listening. You can find me on Twitter at Nels Lindahl, on LinkedIn, and you can subscribe to my Substack. It'll make me really happy if you do go out and subscribe to my Substack. What do we cover? Well, we covered initiating. What exactly is scale, right? We talked about bucket 1, we talked about bucket 2, and we talked about bucket 3, which may have lost meaning because those slides were a while ago. Bucket 1 is the APIs, the things that you can go out and just get a hold of right now, that you can connect to. Bucket 2, those things in the ecosystems where you're going to build out your machine learning in that ecosystem, use their tools. And bucket 3 is going to be a look at exactly what can happen for you when you're dealing with things that are built on premise, when you're using those open source tools, when you're building in your own environment. Now, analyzing was the using use cases, scale versus maturity. Just thinking about which use cases based on your needs are going to meet exactly what you wanted. And we talked about directing, leaning into ML scale. And the last little bit there, we were talking about platforming, what is compelling about scale, and some of those ML ops takeaways that I've had from looking and digging in with my research on those things. Now, I want to close here with my key takeaways for you. My key takeaways are, as always, have an ML strategy. Make sure that you really know that story that you're going to communicate. Understand your pipelines and what you're building out to deliver that ML strategy. Because if you don't consider the pipelines, if you don't think about the ML ops, if you don't look at those things that we were pulling up on those slides, you're not going to be ready to deliver. And if you're not ready to deliver, you may miss your opportunity. Because when people commit funding, they're going to expect results. And if you can't communicate back with a story that's based around your return on investment, you're not going to be successful in the long term. And that means really figuring out your ML ops. It does. It means you need to know exactly with those pipelines and deliveries what you're going to do. And ultimately, you're going to need to know your ecosystem to be able to deliver on that. And that is my last slide.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This has been an incredible presentation, and we really appreciate you sharing these insights with us. If you could stop sharing your screen, and the audience will give you a huge virtual round of applause. Thank you. Yeah, that was awesome. For the audience, it's time for you to make your way to your next session. Along the way, make sure you accept those connection requests and check out our amazing AI exhibits. Thanks so much, and we'll see you around.
Thank you all.